The Saints have farewelled a skipper, while the Dees feel like they've got Clayton Oliver 2.0. Jack Steele, one of the names that kind of emerged out of nowhere late in the trade period, has landed at his third AFL club. How much of a move is this from a St Kilda's perspective, for Melbourne, and for AFL Fantasy and Supercoaches? Have we got something here of a great of our formats? Are we going to get at least one more year of goodness out of the man of Steele? We're going to unpack all that and more on today's trade review of Jack Steele. Just one of my most favourite players to enjoy, certainly from a fantasy football perspective. Just, that consistency of effort, intensity, huge work rate player that can get in and around the ground defensively at his peak, one of the best tacklers in the league. And then, while not the most polished, skilled ball user, still is more than capable at the elite levels of the AFL of hitting targets, of taking marks, and certainly setting up ball movement and transition play for his team. A really, really nice player. But for St Kilda, does this hurt them at all? The fact that they told him to go and investigate other options out there tells you exactly how much they were planning on utilising him in his core and politely only role that he can play at AFL level, which is as an inside midfielder. First touch of extracting the ball, getting that clearance win, and then applying that defensive pressure with one of the best tacklers in the game. Because he doesn't have a secondary positional dimension, I can kind of see under a Ross Lyon coaching regime, and where St Kilda hope and believe that they're heading towards, that a player like Jack probably wasn't going to help them be where they wanted to be next year, let alone any other seasons ahead of that. So they pushed him out. So politely, St Kilda must internally anyway feel like they've got the cattle that can help them through this midfield. And it's safe to say that on paper, and that's all we can judge it off at this time of year, we're 6 months away from the first ball being bounced in the proper season, right? On paper, it looks pretty solid. So let's round it out. Taking the ruck duties, De Koning and Marshall, both mobile, kind of the tall mid-style rucks, not elite hit-out to advantage style rucks, but solid without any questions in that. So that part of the game, cool, no problem at all. Then you look through the midfield, you go, well, Nasiah Wanganeen-Miller is fast becoming, if not already, top 5 player in the league. Explosive pace, damaging skill set, and then has this evasiveness and strength about him to be able to not only win the contest, but get out into space within seconds. And then if he gets a chance to take an overhead mark inside forward 50, Melbourne fans know exactly how painful that is. So you've got that. You've got the defensive and intensity sort of midfielder in Marcus Windhager. You've got that strike, strong, tall midfielder in Mateus Filippo. And then throw in a more rounded, sort of more accumulator, but again, has some strength and some good skill set in a Sam Flanders. That 4 midfielders, I like that. Outside of Naz, none of them are really just yet given this accolade and love that they probably should have or could have in 12 months' time. But as a core 4, they're not missing anything. Power, strength, speed, accumulation and precision across those 4. It's nice. And then you throw in guys like McRae if you need another accumulator as your 5th option. Garcia if you need, again, some support on. Windhager, you need another, kind of first crack midfield, a bit of defensive focus. Just on those 6 alone, you're okay. And then you've got a Sinclair who you could throw in there if you really needed a bit more speed or anything like that. You've got some nice outside with the likes of Toby Travalia, who I really like what he's becoming. You're fine. Again, outside of Naz, there's nothing that's getting the broad media or AFL landscape accolade. But as a young crop that can grow together over the next couple of years with a little bit of experience of McRae floating around, I think it's a really solid midfield. So I can understand why they were happy to let Jack go. But Melbourne's almost on the opposite side of things. They've done the clear out of the old guys in Petrarca and Oliver. And they are still looking for, and I'm fascinated to see what this midfield is going to look like next year. Because clearly they've gone after Jack and gone, we can get a couple of things here. We can get some additional leadership through our midfield to support Jack Viney, which I think is nice. We can get someone that is going to teach great leadership and character traits, great for our culture, and also bring some defensive intensity about him and can still have enough strength in his legs and athleticism and endurance about him to impact and get around the ground enough. So I like that. And I'm interested how this midfield mix works, because what we don't know is under a new coach, what the regime is, what the play style is going to be, what the philosophies of game is going to be. So while we might think we know this midfield mix, and I'm happy to throw out what I think it could be in a second, there's a lot of unknowns that sit through there because we haven't seen what Stephen King really is at AFL level. We've seen glimpses as a caretaker, but really not seen much of it with his own DNA stamped on top of it. But look, Langford's going to be that powerful strike midfielder, deep penetrating kick. You just know you're going to love him. I can see and understand why they'd want to keep Pickett rolling through there, but not at the cost of his impact forward of the ball. So he's going to be around there. Viney, of course, is going to be alongside Steele, sitting through there as both the defensive mind, but also the experience. And then what is the other combination? Where does a Rivers sit? Is it off halfback through the midfield? Is Windsor and Lindsay, are they playing on the outside more, using their speed and skill, or are they coming on the inside? Let alone what they could go and land at the draft with picks 7 and 8. There's some really nice type of mids that they could get through there. Sam Grill, that sort of half forward mid, Sam Cumming I like, Dyson Sharp, let alone some other positions. So I'm fascinated to see exactly how this midfield mix shapes up. But as we turn the corner to look at what this might mean from an AFL fantasy and Supercoach perspective, to suggest that Jack's washed is too presumptuous. Yes, a 95.9 in fantasy isn't great this year, a 94.2 in Supercoach isn't great, but as everything, you've got to look under the numbers. There's a green vest in there a little bit later in the year, so that obviously impacts the scoring elements. But there's 13 AFL fantasy tons, 3 of them 120 plus, 12 Supercoach tons, 2 of them over 120. So more than 1 in 2 are getting to that triple digit mark. So he's still there. But I want to draw your attention to like a 7-game stretch between round 7 to 14. He goes at an average of 107.7 in fantasy and 111.6 in Supercoach. Like, this is echoing what he did the year prior in 2024, where he goes a 106.6 in fantasy and a 108 in Supercoach. So there's moments where it's still there. Now, whether or not that was game style, were there injuries around the elements of that? Was it just a positional elements around how Ross Lyon was coaching? There's a lot of, can he only do it for a 7-week stretch because that's all physically he's now capable of being as a fantasy player? All of those things are interesting to consider. But for me, he sits nicely in this Melbourne team because the thing that probably forced him out of St Kilda being the one-dimensional dynamic probably is what Melbourne need right now, is just an anchor in this midfield that can play the defensive side of things and be sacrificial. We know that's his character, but can also still win a contested footy and gets the ball out nice and crisply. So I quite like this for Melbourne for that reason. But I want to see what's going to happen in the rest of this off-season before committing to either ruling him in or out of fantasy considerations for 2026. If with these early picks, Melbourne try to address some key position players, and there are some nice players that should be around for them at the draft at this spot, whether it be another small forward like a Doveston, whether they go Taylor and get a little bit of height down back to prepare for the May and Lever moving on over the next period of years. They go more half-forward types like the Grill that can be powerful through the midfield but aren't yet at that full-time mid-level. I don't know. But before I rule Steele in or out, I want to see what they do specifically on draft day and how, under this new coaching philosophy, Stephen King wants to use players like Pickett, Lindsay, Windsor, Rivers. Because those guys, there's a world where it all breaks in a particular way, where their midfield requires Steele to be the 80% centre attendance mid, and we're away, and it's on. And all of a sudden, this 105 plus average is well and truly achievable. And now we've got 10 points per game of value at the near top end, and I'm interested. There's also a world where he and Viney are kind of sharing the leadership role through there. And he's coming off a secondary position, more just for team balance, and the 90s might be as good as he's going to get. So I want to see the off-field moves in the draft, and I want to see the structure and the philosophy from Stephen King through the preseason before committing to ruling him in or out. But what's your take? Why don't you tell me who you think are the top 5 players that are going to fill that centre attendance midfield role for the Dees? What's your combo? I've listed a bunch of names that could be there. Yep, welcome for you to throw the draftee names in there if you'd like. But who are the 5? Put them down for me in the comments section below if you're watching this on YouTube. If you haven't already and you're watching, subscribe to the channel and like the video. Make sure you do that as well. We're also available as an audio podcast. Every single player that's moved clubs this offseason, it's also available for you to audio-wise check out. And make sure you subscribe to the channel, because as we turn the corner to December, the player positions start dropping, the team reveals start dropping, just before the formats all open up too. So getting not close to the start of preseason for fantasy footy coaches, but it's on simmer at the very least. Hey, thanks so much for tuning in. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. We'll be back again real soon with another player that has moved clubs and giving you our fantasy footy take for the 2026 season.